Jesus is inviting us to reconsider where our deepest loyalties lie and make a kind of commitment to each other that would be just as strong as our commitment to our biological family.
Hey, welcome back to the Same Jesus Podcast. We are your hosts, Russell and AJ, and we are delighted that you're joining us for another conversation. We host conversations for the church in the midst of a noisy world, playing both sides against the middle in pursuit of the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. AJ, how you doing? How's your last few weeks been?
Overall well.
Yeah.
I'm 44. I had a doctor's appointment recently and have been told, Russell, that my lipids are too high. So I'm now in a new season of sharing sensitive medical information.
Is that the stage of our relationship? When I ask how are you, you bring out the doctor's report.
Yeah, I feel like my soul is well.
But your lipids are not.
My lipids are, and I don't know how to pay attention to lipids, but
Right.
I'm supposed to pay attention to the lipids.
They didn't teach us that in sixth grade health class. Well,
No.
as long as your mind is still working and your heart is still working, we can still have this conversation
Yeah,
today.
we're good. We're good. I'm doing awesome. You doing good, Russell? Life okay for you?
I am, yeah. Just got back from a little bit of extended travel, hosting some young leaders gatherings in Seattle and San Diego called Pillars, which were incredible. And excited to have this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to talk about family today, which is a loaded term. It's a loaded concept. And as we try to do with these conversations, we recognize the ways that two extremes probably not the right word, but two sides can sort of dominate the conversation. And what we want to do as Foursquare pastors is explore them, but also sort of pit them against one another and sort of bring up the middle position. And when we think about family, here's why I think this conversation is so necessary for the church right now. We have the sociological reasons. There's so much data suggesting that the concept of the quote unquote nuclear family is shifting drastically. We know that fewer households are actually centered on marriage. I think it's 47% in 2022. Fewer families have kids at home. People are marrying later. Fertility remains historically low. A very large share of adults are unpartnered. And then you bring in the conversation. So you have that all swirling around in terms of the sort of what we would call the nuclear family. We also are seeing rates of, I'm not sure the actual term, but people cutting off their families and sort of choosing their own families. That's growing. Now, within the church world, what you see is you see two extremes. You see one side saying that the nuclear family is everything. We have to recapture, reclaim, protect the nuclear family. The other side saying you don't even need that at all. And we wanted to enter in this conversation, like, what does the Bible have to say about all this? Like, how do we as followers of Jesus, as pastors, as leaders, as just Christians in the day-to-day, how do we hold together the tension of, hey, family matters. Like, we are to honor our mother and father. That matters. But also, Jesus says, who's my mother and who are my brothers, right? Like, Jesus does something new with family. Yep. So that's why we think this conversation is really important. So as we sort of come to this topic, AJ, you are a Bible scholar. What immediately comes to mind for you as you think about how Christians can live into this concept of family?
Well, I don't know if it's anything that's particularly novel, but you brought up the commandment, honor your mother and your father, right? So this is from the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, and it's the only commandment in the 10 that comes with a promise, right? If you honor your mother and your father, you'll live long in the land. There's this connection in the text between our rootedness in a place and our relationship with our family of origin.
And Ephesians says that too.
Yeah, that's right. So when one becomes disrupted, when we become rootless, right? We're not from a place, we're not in a place. It often affects our relationship to our family of origin and whatnot. But the thing that immediately comes to mind here is the tension in Scripture between honor your mother and your father, and the commandment not just to honor your parents, but also to leave your parents.
Right. Yes.
So at the end of Genesis 2, God tells the humans this is why a man shall leave his mother, his father, be united to his wife. That leaving, it's interesting. That commandment to leave is actually embedded in the text before sin, meaning leaving is actually part of a good world.
Yeah.
Leaving is a part of a sinless world. So it's interesting, the tension in Scripture between honoring and being differentiated.
Yeah.
You honor, but you also you're part of the family, but you're also not a part. You step away. And I think that our conversation with Dr. Imes is going to help give us a way to think about that in the church, because what we're not going to say is, we're not going to say, which is what a cult would say, which is like, leave your biological family and come join us church. Hey, you're part of the church. The church ain't the mafia. We're not the spiritual mafia. Like, that's not the goal. But the opposite is not that we just show up once a week and we're not in each other's lives. Like, we actually become a family. So I think there's a third beautiful way in the middle that I think Dr. Imes is going to help us think about in a rootless culture like our own. How do we honor and leave at the same time? Right.
I also think, like I said, there's the sociological reasons for a conversation like this. Like, the whole concept of family is just so messy right now that the church has a way to enter into that, which we'll talk about. But also there's theological reasons. So you think about, we are inheritors, we're living in this culture of secularism, right, as this dominant worldview. And there's aspects of secularism that are diametrically opposed to the invitation of the Scriptures for how we live as family. So I'm thinking of a couple different things. One, expressive individualism as a aspect of secularism, right? Like that, who I am and who I express myself to be is the highest good. Yeah. Where the Bible talks about you're adopted into this family, where you don't get to pick your siblings, right? Like, you're part of a larger collective. Like, you must do this together. You need one another. So it flies in the face of that. You have things like, in a culture of expressive individualism, then relationships can be very transactional, or the scholar Andrew Root calls them instrumentalized, right? Like, we use relationships for what good they bring to me personally. And in the Scriptures, you have like texts like Galatians 6, which says we carry one another's burdens. You have 1 Corinthians 13 talking to us about love. There's this sense of, that's not the way we do it. Covenant, not contract, is the invitation of the New Testament. So there's also, are there other theological themes as you think about secularism and the spirit of secularism and how that frames relationships or family conversations that the church says, hey, not so fast, my friend. We're doing something different over here.
Charles Taylor wrote probably the defining book on understanding the secular world a number of years ago, and he says that the secular view of the world imagines a closed system where there's nothing outside that system. So meaning, right, a secular view would say the material is all there is. There's nothing outside of that. It's a closed worldview, and a Christian perspective doesn't see does not see the world. We see an open universe where there is the material, but there is the unseen that is even more is while we can't see it, the physical is as important. And I think what's important is that gives us a way of thinking about the way we treat human beings as something that's more than just sociology. Every interaction and every relationship has a spiritual component to it.
Right.
So Jesus, says this, Matthew 25, that when I embody a person in need, I give clothing, I give water to the least of these. Jesus says, you are not serving in a closed system.
Totally.
You are serving that person, and it so turns out are serving the king when you do it.
Yeah.
So I think secularism flattens things. It makes it so that a relationship is just a relationship. But the Christian worldview says when you welcome the stranger, you're welcoming Jesus into the room.
Yeah.
So every human interaction then takes on a sacredness to it and a depth that a secular worldview can't conceive or appreciate. This is going to be a really meaningful conversation. Let's get into our dialogue with Dr. Imes here and talk about becoming God's family. Here we go. Let's have a great conversation.
Well, we are joined today with Dr. Carmen Imes, professor of Old Testament at Biola University. And we just learned also has been a part of the Foursquare movement in a period of her life, which is awesome. So it's an extended family. Dr. Imes, thank you so much for taking some time to join us on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're having this conversation around family, something that you have studied and written extensively about. Your most recent book, Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters, really interrogates that question. And as we were talking offline, one of the things that we like to do on this podcast, since one of the core doctrines within Foursquare is this idea of moderation, that we do not want to be given to extremes, but find this middle position that holds those two in tension. Maybe let's start there. So when we talk about family, when the Bible talks about family, you almost see the two extremes within our cultural discourse. You see one side that says the nuclear family is everything. If the church is going to persist and last and flourish, it's going to be on the backs of the nuclear family. We have to have that. And then the other side swings and says, the nuclear family doesn't matter at all. Jesus relativized that. He says, who are my mother and my brothers, right? It doesn't matter at all. So as you think about the biblical concept of family in your research, what images spring to mind? How do those two extremes, how do you hold them in tension?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to notice that when God decides to redeem the planet, he doesn't choose to start a corporation. He doesn't start an NGO or something like there. It's not like a nonprofit. He calls a family and says, through your descendants, I'm going to bless all nations. So there is something about family, biological family, that really factors hugely in the biblical story. I would hesitate to say nuclear family because the point is intergenerational. This is going to carry on through the generations. So we're not thinking mom, dad, and 2.5 kids. We're thinking generations of faithful followers of God and who enter into a covenant with him. But then, as you said, when Jesus comes along as a member of that extended family, he begins to redefine family around himself, and he prioritizes the family of faith over what we would call the nuclear family. So he says, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And then that sentiment gets picked up by the Apostle Paul as he refers to fellow believers as brothers and sisters in Christ. He's using family language to talk about other believers. And it could have been something different. It could have been, all about co-workers, or it could have sounded institutional, but instead it sounds like a family. And I think there's something really powerful happening there, that Jesus is inviting us to reconsider where our deepest loyalties lie, and make a kind of commitment to each other that would be just as strong as our commitment to our biological family.
Carmen, I had the gift of getting to pre-read this book. This is such an important book for the church. It's such an important book for the world. In a wildly individualistic society where we don't know what it means to have more relationship than what was forged last Thursday, right? We have a very unrooted community. Jesus from the cross looks down from the cross and says to John, "Take care of my mom," and says to his mom, "Take care of John." And it seems even from the cross, the call of Jesus is the creation of a family for people that maybe have unstable families, right? Mary's going to lose her son, who's going to ascend, and John obviously is going to take on this new responsibility. So when we say the church is a family, isn't that at the heart of what Jesus came to establish on the earth? Is a new kind of family that is rooted in what he's commanded?
Yeah, I think that moment at the cross is such a good one because it shows us Jesus actually intentionally forming not just, family in a vague sense, but family in the sense of particular commitments to one another. And I feel like I'm in the middle of experiencing this in a powerful way because I'm the caregiver for my dad who has Lewy body dementia, which is a kind of dementia that mainly affects, at least at first, executive functioning. So his memory is pretty good, but it's figuring out how to buckle a seatbelt or how to pay the bills, or, those are the kinds of skills that are going. And so he needs a lot of support. And I'm in California and he's in Colorado, which means supporting him is challenging, and I can't do it by myself. And what I saw, a couple of things happened early on. The first was one of the guys from his men's group from church texted me, or I think my dad asked, "Hey, can Bill talk? Bill's reading your book and he has a few questions about it." And I thought, okay, I don't have the capacity to talk to every reader of my books. I love doing it, but I'm limited. I'm finite. I can't talk to all the people. And so I was like, well, can he just email me? And instead, my dad gave him my phone number. And so he calls and I'm like, oh, hi, Bill, and kind of set aside what I'm working on. And turns out Bill was not calling to talk to me about my book. He was calling to talk to me about my dad. And that was his way of getting my phone number, because he said, the guys and I have noticed a significant decline in your dad. And we just wanted to let you know that we're here to help, put us to work. We want to help. And so that was early on when we were still trying to figure out how to rearrange his life so that he's not driving and not having to make decisions himself. So that was early on. It was such a powerful example to me of how the church becomes a family, because he doesn't have any family members close by who are in relationship with him. And so he relies on the family of faith. The other example is kind of crazy. We're getting ready to remodel our kitchen, and we were talking. We found a guy. We think we want to do it, and they were saying once he does your kitchen, you're his forever and he's yours. He will drop everything and come help you anytime. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because my dad was a remodeling contractor, and some of his customers came to our wedding. Because he had been working for them for so many years, that was the bond. And then I realized, oh, right. The guy who will drop anything to help my dad in Colorado is somebody who was his customer. My dad remodeled his kitchen. They discovered that they had a shared faith in Jesus. And now Steve is keeping me afloat because he's actually showing up and doing all the things like refilling the med dispenser and fixing the phone and taking my dad shoe shopping and whatever, all the things I can't do from here. And how unlikely that you would become the caregiver and medical power of attorney for the guy who remodeled your kitchen. Yeah. But this is the kind of thing that happens in the family of faith.
Yeah. Carmen, can I ask another question just on a Bible level? I mean, I'm always struck, as any reader of the Bible is, when the letters of the New Testament are written. For example, when Paul would write, he would refer to people as brothers and sisters. In Romans 16, he mentions this kid named Rufus, and he says, say hi to his mom, who's been a mom to me, right? This language that Bible scholars would call fictive kinship, right? It's this idea that the language is creating community. Do you think the original readers of these texts would have been weirded out by Paul saying, "What's up, bro? What's up, sister?" And is that what he's trying to do when he says that stuff?
Yeah, I think so, actually. So we're sort of used to it. It's like churchy language, and so it doesn't strike us as being strange. But in the first century, the strongest bond between any two people was between siblings. And this was one of the most surprising discoveries I made as I was reading. I learned this from Joe Hallerman, who has a great book on when the church was a family. And he says that in a world of communal collective identity, where family is super important, actually, and where marriages were not seen as a marriage between equals. It wasn't like, oh, I've fallen in love with you and so let's get married. But they were arranged, and the men would have been significantly older than the women. There wasn't as close an emotional bond between husbands and wives as there was between siblings. And the sense of loyalty and obligation, I'm going to show up for you when you need me, was strongest among siblings. So that if my husband and my brother both needed me at the same time for something, I would show up for my brother, and my husband would totally understand, I play second fiddle to your brother. So that's really different than how we process and think about family in the West, in the modern West. And so I think we miss the weight of what Paul is doing when he calls believers brother or sister, because for us, brother and sister is like, I don't know, sibling rivalry. We think of like, it's kind of on again, off again. But he's actually selecting the strongest language he had available to him to talk about our bond in Christ.
That's fascinating. And it leads into another question that I've been thinking about to take it a little bit more controversial. My friends and our friends who are single often feel like the loneliest place for them is the church.
Yep.
Now, I think what you just spoke to could, if we flesh that theology practically, really opens up space for them. But why is that? Why, especially in the Western context, why do single people feel so alone in the church? And how do we, as the family of God, practically make more room so that's not the case?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I think the culture at large idolizes the nuclear family. And I think the church has jumped on that bandwagon. And I'm not a historian in the sense that would help in this case, but I'm told that there was a real shift somewhere in the middle of the 1900s or so on how people thought about family. And rather than thinking more collectively with a bigger extended family, it kind of shifted to husband, wife, 2.5 kids, and a dog, and a minivan, whatever, in the home. And so that then gave rise to ministries like Focus on the Family, which I think was trying to strengthen families, but had a pretty narrow definition of family as this like nuclear entity. And so I think in all the good that was done in strengthening the home, there was at the same time some collateral damage in making too narrow our vision for what family life could look like. Probably some other factors that contribute to this are transience. We move a lot more. The urbanization has disconnected us from our extended families so that maybe we see them at a reunion, but it's not like week in and week out we're having meals together and living on the same property and going to the same church and the same schools. Like that's becoming more rare. And so as our extended family connections have thinned, we've placed more and more weight on the nuclear family, and then we've become really busy people. And so we have a lifestyle that doesn't have space for hospitality. And so, we got all our things going on. How are we going to make space for others to join us? But I think if we could recover the idea that the church is a family and begin to incorporate singles into our families, I think this could be really powerful.
Carmen, you as an Old Testament scholar have likely done a lot of work reflecting on the very first the very first commandment that God gives the humans in the garden, right? He says, "Be fruitful and multiply," which God gave after He gave the animals that commandment. So they actually get the commandment before the humans do. It's the same commandment: be fruitful and multiply. So that commandment often gets really interpreted to mean go have a bunch of kids. And certainly that can be an element of the commandment, be fruitful and multiply, meaning go have, a lot of children. And if that is a commandment, it seems to me that is the one commandment that we've actually managed to do. So well done. That said, as we move forward,
the earth is populated now. Great.
Good work. I wonder, Carmen, tell me if this is true. The most fruitful person in all of human history is a single guy from Nazareth. Is it possible that we have overinterpreted that on a biological sense and failed to capture the bigger vision of fruitfulness in the kingdom of God, the Great Commission, go into all the world and make disciples of all nations? Is now the work of Jesus reframing the commandment of being fruitful and multiply in some way?
That's a great question, AJ. I think yes. I think what happens when we look at Jesus and his life is that we realize if we have misdiagnosed or misconstrued human identity and purpose, then it becomes obvious. So if we read in Genesis as be fruitful and multiply is what we do so that we get to be the image of God, or that being the image of God requires that we are fruitful and multiply, then we might think that we're less than fully human or less than fulfilling our purpose if we're single or if we have not born children. But then we find Jesus, and the New Testament says Jesus is the image of God, and he's not married and hasn't had any babies. So I think this is where we go, oh, maybe I've overinterpreted that passage. And also, we're in a different scenario where there are people populating the whole earth. So it's no longer the situation that we're in danger of going extinct. I think God's desire was for the representatives of his presence, like these physical embodied humans who reflect his glory to the world, for us to be all in all the places. And we are now, even at least temporarily in Antarctica. So the penguins now know that Yahweh is God, I guess.
Yes.
But I think that it becomes really problematic if we think that we're not fully human unless we are married and having children. And we're in a season, I think, as a church where we're recognizing the need to rapidly rethink how we talk about this with the rise in same-sex attraction and those in the church who are experiencing same-sex attraction. And if you're in a church like the Foursquare Church, which has a traditional view of marriage between a man and a woman, then you actually have to do a better job of making space for singles to be incorporated into the wider family of faith, because you're in effect saying the Bible says you can't be married. And so then we have to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
You got something, AJ?
I really do. Actually,
go ahead,
Carmen,
go ahead,
since
go
I
ahead.
got you on, we just got to go there. Who did Cain marry? I mean, just say it. I mean, did God make another? Was there another family?
Yeah.
There must have been another family, right? Otherwise, this is just a creepy story. Please help us out.
There must have been more people. So I've seen people get really uncomfortable with the Cain story because it implies that there's other humans, and they're like, but it says Adam and Eve. And it's like the Bible doesn't say God only made Adam and Eve. It says that he took Adam and put him in the garden. He could have been taking Adam from a bigger population of humans and saying, now I'm going to do something special with you here in the garden. The Bible actually implies right off the bat that there are more people because because God puts a mark on Cain so that nobody will kill him.
That's right.
Yeah,
this implies that there are other buddies around who might do this. Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's all. That's the reason we brought you on. I just needed to hear about that.
That's the only question AJ was curious. He needed an answer there. I'm curious, not to ask you to interpret all this data, but it is fascinating when you look at some of the sociological trends right now, especially around this concept of church as family. Two data points that are interesting to me that I've been praying into and thinking about. One, we're seeing a resurgence of Gen Z men coming to church. Yep. But we're not seeing that same resurgence among Gen Z women.
Correct.
So it actually Gen Z women are leaving church.
Let me tell you why.
Okay, great. That's the first question. Go. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like being a woman in church is really hard because there's all these sociological dynamics that work against our full participation and even our safety. Even in a denomination like Foursquare, which is founded by a woman and has a strong view of women in ministry, I am sure that there are pockets of the church where women feel like they can't bring their whole selves to the church. And there is I was going to say an inability. I'm going to say a refusal among women to put up with crap in the church, to put up with toxic forms of leadership that cover up abuse. And it's like, why would we want to be part of this? So I speak as someone who is deeply committed to the church, and I believe that it's worth, that we shouldn't give up on it and that it's worth engaging. But I understand why lots of women are walking away. And I think I understand why lots of men are moving towards it because they're feeling rootless. There's a sense in our wider culture, like, what does it even mean to be a man? How am I supposed to live? Like, I basically play video games and scroll, and I don't really have a sense of purpose in my life. And church has the opportunity to provide a sense of purpose, a sense of there's a real attraction to Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy because there's a kind of a rule of life and physical embodied practices that people can participate in. And it's not a surprise to me that this is attracting young men who are feeling that sense of like malaise or just like life is kind of bleh. But at the same time, women who have often been the majority of church members are like, I'm out because I don't want to put up with this kind of hypocrisy anymore. So I think the Foursquare Church is really well positioned because you have a doctrine on women that embraces women in leadership, women exercising all the gifts, that you could actually provide a haven for women to stay connected to the church. But that will require the church to be really honest about abuse, to be intolerant of it, and to look it full in the face, to be willing for investigations to happen where needed, and to root out the forms of misogyny that even creep into egalitarian spaces.
Absolutely.
Like what? Do you have examples of that?
I mean, women... okay, I just spoke at a church. I was one of the main speakers at the conference. I gave a couple of breakout sessions, and then I preached 3 times. And this is a church that has women pastors, that has women in lots of forms of leadership, and was very enthusiastic about having me come. But here's what I noticed, and I had a wonderful time. Here's what I noticed. After I spoke, 80% of the men who lined up to talk to me had something to teach me that they thought I should think about.
Interesting.
And 80% of the women lined up to tell me, this was amazing, it was fabulous, life-changing, thank you for being here. The men, I felt like I was being continually mansplained. Like, so here's a layperson who has never had theological training, and he is trying to float his pet theory of the image of God to a person with a Ph.D. who's read all the evangelical dissertations on the image of God. And I am not saying that I know everything or that I'm unteachable, because I'm learning every day of the week, and people regularly ask me perceptive questions that teach me things. So it's not that I already have it all figured out, but the presumption of these men that I probably needed their help to understand this a little better because they've been thinking about it for a minute, is just an example of the kind of cultural dynamic that's even in a place where women's teaching and leading is embraced. There's still this really persistent assumption that men know more than women, and we need to be told what's what.
Yeah, the disproportion of 80% of each. That data.
It was
speaks
so
for itself
interesting,
right there.
and I mentioned it to my husband, and then he was like, "Holy cow!" He stood beside me and watched it happen. He was like, "You're right. This is so crazy." And I don't feel like I get that everywhere, but there are some church cultures that have just kind of allowed, like an unquestioningly critical view of women to seep in.
I feel comfortable saying this, that often the most toxic forms of harm towards women are done in spaces that claim to be egalitarian and mutualist, because they get to say, they get to claim the title as almost a way of being like, well, we have the right theology. It's one thing to have the theology. It's a completely different thing to actually embody and practice a mutualist community. Carmen, I live here in Eugene, Oregon, and we're a big college town. And one of the things I've noticed about cults, we have a lot of cults that come through Eugene. Eugene's kind of this old hippie town, and big university, 30,000 students at the University of Oregon. And one of the things I've noticed about cults is that cults will often try to pull people away from their physical home, their families. Don't talk to your family. Pull away from the people that know you and the people. The one thing I worry about with this conversation of the family is that it gets interpreted as pull away from the people who brought you into this world, when in reality, sometimes the people that brought us into the world have really important things that ground us and keep us from going in crazy directions. Help us explain how it is still important that we remain in relationship with our physical families, our biological families.
That's a really good question, AJ, because sometimes when you start talking about the church as family, people will say oh, so we should just stop taking care of our kids, stop taking care of our parents, whatever. Well, no. I think it's a redefining relationships in the church so that they're included in what we consider to be family. But it's not a cutting ourselves off from family.
Right.
You already mentioned what Jesus says to his mother on the cross. He's still taking care of his biological mother as he's dying. But as a member of this broader family of faith, I was thinking before we got on about this concept of chosen family that's kind of all the rage right now. And I think it's become this wider cultural idea is like, you don't have to put up with these toxic people you were stuck with when you were born. You can just pick people you want to be around and like create new families around that. And I actually think that this is equally problematic to the hyper focus on a nuclear family. And neither one of these are the vision of Scripture.
Yep.
So the church is not a place where we craft it's not supposed to be a place where we craft our own echo chamber so that we can hang out with people who think exactly the way we do. We're not picking, and this is where I get concerned sometimes about people who are disillusioned with church, so they start a house church, but it's like by invitation only.
Totally.
I'm just picking my people, and I want to hang out with my people because I feel comfortable with them and we think the same way. And I'm like, Paul had really harsh words to say for people who sorted themselves into categories and refused to hang out and play with others.
Yeah.
And so I feel like one of the things that's just powerful, I was going to say almost magical, but magical is not the right word, just spiritually powerful about the church is the way it brings together people we would not pick to be part of our family.
Yes.
So just as we were born into a physical, biological family that we did not choose, and we are stuck with crazy uncle or whatever, dysfunctional parent, we're stuck with it. So we are stuck with the people who God brings into the church. They voted differently than I did. They think differently about the atonement or about women in ministry or about what style of music we should sing. They maybe work in a different sector. They have different education or lack thereof. We're in different income brackets. We had different growing up experiences. We see the world in different ways. The algorithm is feeding us different information all week long. And part of the beauty of the body of Christ is that we're together with these people. Where else would we do this? Yeah. Where else would we gather with people that we did not choose? So I think the nuclear family has problems when we hyper-focus on that. It's problematic for us to just be like, no, I'm going to pick my family, this chosen family idea. I think the family of faith says, let the Holy Spirit show up and do a miracle among people who would not otherwise be connected. Watch what I will do in an intergenerational, multicultural family of faith. And it's amazing.
And I want to double click on the intergenerational piece because I think that's so critical. That's what I hear in all of this. So part of my role is I help church planters start new churches. And it has been common practice to sort of define your target demographic, right?
Yes.
And plant the church for your target demographic. And I think the positive, the positive that's trying to be expressed there is we all have unique stories. We have unique backgrounds, charisms. And so there's a recognition of like, we want the gospel to be incarnated for those that we can speak the common language. I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly pushing and saying, no, we must be an intergenerational community, which is messier and more difficult. But the goods that come from that are far outweigh anything. But it's hard.
As you know, Russell, it's faster to plant a church among a target micro demographic. And there's actually a word for this I talk about in the book, the homogeneous unit principle. And it's actually been a kind of a mainstay in church planting circles that you should say, I'm trying to reach Black urban professionals in my zip code or whatever. But what if our goal was to actually become a beacon of light in a community that draws in the full range of people that we have in our community, that becomes a family of faith that reflects the demographics of the place where the church is. So in other words, if you're living in rural Iowa and everyone in your town is white European descent farmer, like, it's not unfaithful for you to have a church of white European descent farmers. Like, but if your community is more diverse than that, then we should be asking, why is our church not reflecting the diversity of our neighborhood? Who are we not including implicitly by the way that we position ourselves, the way that we preach, the way that we sing, the kind of food we have at potlucks? You know, what are we communicating inadvertently even about who doesn't belong here and who does belong here?
Right.
And it takes work to like think through how are we going to reshape things so that others feel welcome.
What are those tools? That's my question of like the intergenerational piece. Like I have Bonhoeffer in the back of my mind. Those who are the lovers of community destroy community because they have their idea of what they want instead of the people that God is actually bringing. So it's like that life together. But it's hard. So we talked to our church planters saying, hey, pursuing an intergenerational, allowing Jesus to build this church with your crazy aunts, your crazy uncles, you know, the grandparents, like it's harder. What are some practical relational tools that you would offer pastors or lay leaders listening here of like, this is how you can step into it?
Well, I feel a little bit like a fraud offering ideas because I'm not a practitioner in the sense that I haven't been in, you know, paid church leadership to like where I'm actually in the trenches doing this. But I've been a member of the church my whole life and I'm old now. So here are some things I've observed that seem to work. Don't have all your events be age segregated or gender segregated. Like actually do things as a church that incorporate everybody across the lifespan. So a church that we were part of for 4 years had regular work days in which it was expected that kids would show up and college students would show up and parents and adults would show up and that we would be working side by side to rake the leaves and clean the gutters and paint the walls and whatever. And there are lots of things kids can do to be part of that. And when the kids are working alongside college students, bonds form that would not otherwise be there. So that's one thing is to plan things to do together that include a wider range of human beings, and to be intentional about that. It's so in vogue to be like, we're going to have a 20-somethings group, and it's going to, or you know, a singles group or whatever. And there's a place for that, but I feel like if we actually want to form intergenerational friendships, we need to do stuff together. So meals, like everybody eats. So the same church has an annual soup making competition that they call the Super Bowl. And kids participate in this. Like a kid will, you know, weeks in advance say, okay, I want to enter the Super Bowl. And they work with their parents to figure out, okay, what do I want to cook? Like finding a recipe and then shopping for ingredients and then excitedly watching as everybody tries their soup. So these are things, you know, serving unhoused neighbors, doing projects in the community, putting on events like a trunk or treat or something in October. That can involve lots of different ages. And I think that's one way to do it.
Yeah. Wow.
I tell a story in the book about showing up to a quilting group where I was 40 years younger than the next youngest member of the group. And I was there with my newborn and showing up, you know, huge age range. There was a woman who was 100 years old in that group.
Wow.
So just like across the lifespan, just sitting across the quilt from each other and telling stories. Those were really formative years. And part of what was formative was noticing they were not giving me parenting advice because they were at the stage of parenting where they realized all the stuff I thought would really work didn't actually. So I really don't have any advice for you. And so now that I'm in that zone, I get it.
Carmen, by the way, soup searches on Google just skyrocketed for those who have been listening.
Super Bowl, got it.
Soup sales have just gone up. I want to go back to a thing I mentioned about Romans, right? In Romans, 16, Paul mentions 26 people by name, and he mentions this woman who he calls his mom. And he actually doesn't name her. We don't know who it is. It's just the mom of Rufus, who has become my mom. Paul also writes to Timothy, and he doesn't just refer to Timothy as Timothy. He calls him my true son in the faith. He refers to him as his boy, as his son. And I wonder, Carmen, the importance of the church in a moment like today, where divorce is rampant, people are losing their families, people are losing parents, of individuals who take upon themselves the call to enfranchise and to reparent people who have lost actual parents in the church. Is that a ministry the church is called to today?
So yeah, absolutely. I think the church is a really unique place where we have the opportunity to be reparented and to give people a home and a family when maybe home has been a painful place for them or place of loss, and we can re-experience that. No parent is perfect, and every parent has strengths and weaknesses, and so by entering into intergenerational friendships with others, we have the opportunity to receive from others what we did not receive from our own parents, and to give to others, maybe even give to others what we were unable to give to our children for whatever reason, but give to others what they couldn't receive from their parents. That there's something really beautiful about recognizing that no one parent is the complete and total package. Yeah, no one child is receiving everything they need from just one person or from a mom and a dad. And so I love the way that happens in the church, and I've seen it in so many ways. At our church, we've really tried to have intergenerational home groups, and where we have single and married, not necessarily children in the group, but like full ages from like college age on up. We've worked hard to come up with place people in groups so that they don't become just a college group. And the church I'm talking about has lots of college students, and so that's always the challenge. And I imagine in Eugene, that's one of the challenges perennially with so many college students in town. It's beautiful to worship alongside college students, but also they need to break out of the bubble and recognize that not everybody is 18 to 22 years old, and that there are things going on in the world that can help contextualize, like other seasons of life can help to contextualize what feels like a really big deal to me right now is actually less of a big deal. Having intergenerational friendships helps us take a long view on some of the things that feel like stress points for us.
Carmen, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I wonder if we could end with this question, because this episode, there was lots of different things that inspired this episode, but one data point in particular that broke my heart that I keep praying into. It's recently come out that the rates of single moms attending church has never been lower than ever.
Ooh. Wow.
It's something like in the American Evangelical Church, something like 25%.
Wow.
Single moms aren't attending church anymore.
Yeah.
Even implicitly in our conversation today, two groups of people, one that we've definitely talked about, the older, right? Right now in society, legal assisted suicide is a real conversation. Abortion is a real conversation.
Yeah.
What do both those groups have in common? They're weak. They're vulnerable. They're socially, they no longer contribute to a productive, efficient, oriented culture.
Right.
I don't know a lot, but I know that the church as family, one of the reasons we exist is for the weak.
Yes.
We exist for the vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if single moms feel like the church is not a place for them, regardless of what people are saying about revival's not happening.
Yeah.
We're not doing something right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could even speak to, in sort of these last minutes, what is the opportunity for us as the church if we really step into this image of being the expanded family of God, to be a space where the weak and the vulnerable and those who are quote unquote viewed as non-contributors to society, we say, no, this is a space for you. We get to do it together.
I feel like the easiest way I can say it is to say that every one of us is like a Lego. And our purpose is not fulfilled if we're not connected to each other. And the New Testament talks about us being built into a temple. We rise to become a holy temple in which the Spirit dwells. And as I think about the church, I think about these are all the Legos that God has brought together. And if it doesn't work to just sit by ourselves on the shelf like a bunch of individual Legos in a row. It also doesn't work to just pile us up. Like we're not fulfilling our purposes if we're a pile of Legos. What we need is to be meaningfully contributing to an overall structure by being built together and connected to each other, and then God can do something really amazing with us. So as I think about the church, when I walk in, I'm always wondering who's not here. Who's not here that should be here, that we could invite in, because we actually need them and they need us. They're not fulfilling their purpose if they're not part of a community of faith. And we're incomplete without them and the gifts that the Lord has given them to contribute to our wider community. So as we think about single moms, they and their children have something to offer and something to receive from the community. And so, we just need to think creatively about how to invite people in and then how to make space for everybody to actually meaningfully participate and contribute. And as our head moves in that direction, as we begin to pray towards it and long for that, then we can celebrate them when they walk through the door. And it's like, oh, well, who's that? Well, why is she by herself? Well, who are those kids? I've not seen them before. Like, instead of viewing them with suspicion, which is sometimes the default for anyone we see that we haven't met before, like, oh, who's that?
Yeah.
But if our posture is, these are people who, we've been longing to see incorporated and come into our family, then we can celebrate when they show up. And this happened to me with one of my neighbors, not a single mom, but an older gentleman who lived alone, loves his classic cars. He's always sitting out on his driveway in his lawn chair next to his classic cars, waxing them, washing them, polishing them, and waving at us as we walk past to go to church. And I had been really praying, Lord, for Mike, Lord, bring him in. Like, I don't know really how to ask him to come, but I want him to be with us. Yeah. And one day he showed up, and I was so excited to see him because I had been praying for Mike to show up. And so that was an answer to prayer. And so I approached him right away. We started having spiritual conversations. Every time he showed up, he asked me more questions about the Bible or church or things he was wondering. And his spiritual hunger, just needed a safe place to ask the questions. And over the course of many months, we had these conversations. And then we had the big one, the conversation about how he could be made right with God and lay down the burden of sin he'd been carrying for so many years. And I had the joy of sharing with him that Christ had paid for his sin, that all he had to do was say yes to Jesus and what Jesus has done. And Mike became a believer. I had the honor of baptizing him. And now he's part of a church community where he feels like he belongs. And that's what we're here for. This is what it's all about.
Carmen, you're still Foursquare. You're still Foursquare. You're one of us. We know it. You're with us.
Dr. Carmen Imes, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us and have this conversation. FYI, Dr. Imes has written numerous books bearing God's name, being God's image, becoming God's family. That's her latest one, Why the Church Still Matters. I've read it. It's incredibly practical. It's a beautiful mix of both a theologian, understanding of the Old Testament, but also practically how we as practitioners can step into embodying this theology. So, Dr. Imes, thank you so much for taking some time.
Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me. This was a joy.
AJ, as we're bringing this conversation to a close today, there's been lots of data, lots of scripture that we've been exploring, and we're in this really interesting place as an American people, as a Western context. Clearly, the data suggests that the concept of family is shifting drastically, right? It is shifting drastically. But the question we want to ask as Jesus followers is this crisis a threat to the church, or is it actually an opportunity for the church to rediscover what family means? As we've tried to do thus far and will continue, we want to play both sides against the middle. And so there's one side of this conversation that says, look, we need to recover the nuclear family or the church dies. And so there's different things coming to my mind, the concept of the trad wife, craze, different conservative pundits that say the most Christian thing you can do is get married and have lots of kids. I have in the back of my mind Stanley Hauerwas, I'm sure you do, where he says, hey, Christians, we do not put our hope in our children. Rather, our children are a sign of our hope that God has not abandoned the world. But that's one side that says we have to recover the nuclear family. The other side says centering the nuclear family is actually the problem, right? Like Jesus totally dissolves all of that. that language entirely. And we're saying that both have elements of truth and both are incorrect. So as we think about a final word in this middle position, what comes to mind for you? How does the church both honor its mother and its fathers? How does the church, as Titus says, if you're going to be an elder, you need to manage your own household first, right? While still making space to practice, as Dr. Imes suggested, this kinship network of brothers and sisters that is truly elastic, that truly makes room for every person, regardless of their relationship status, regardless of where they're coming from, that we actually can embody our nature, our New Testament nature, as the new family of God.
I think we eat together.
That's a great place to start.
Yeah, we actually share time together for. All right, how many times does the Old Testament tell us that we worship the God of the orphan and the widow, and the fatherless, and the person whose family didn't work? Yeah. And we get to reparent and re-love where those systems have broken down. But we also we teach the nuclear family we need to eat together, and it's important as a family. Like, eat together as a family. Put your phones down. Eat together. Yeah. So we're a mealed people. We eat together. There was a scholar named Barb Rossing years ago who's wrote an article on the word epigenosko in the book of Luke, which is the word to acknowledge or to recognize is the word often translated epigenosko. And she points out that every time in the book of Luke that the word epigenosko is used, they recognize Jesus. It always happens around a meal. Yeah. It's always when people are eating together. And something's in that for us of people that with our chosen family and our biological family, we spend time eating together. I always love Rodney Stark. This is one of my favorite stats in all church history. Rodney Stark, who taught church history, Christian history at Baylor University, his best guess was that the earliest church community in the first 200 years consisted of 70% slaves and women. And that is people who in the natural world lost everything.
Yeah, they have no family.
But they found it in the church. That's our future.
I think it's beautiful.
Get the barbecues ready. That's basically what we're saying.
And I think my last word would be, as it relates with the to use the term the nuclear family, I love the work of Christopher West, who has done as a great book, The Theology of the Body, where he describes marriage as an icon but not an idol. Right? I think there's a way that we can make marriage or children or this idea of the biological nuclear family, we can turn it into an idol. And in the New Testament, what we see is that these relationships, while still significant, are not meant to be idolized, but to be an icon through which people can look at them and see the relationship that Christ shares with the church. Yeah. So something Anna and I, my wife Anna, we talk about with our parenting, we say, hey, we do not, and our boys are young, so we don't say this to their faces yet. We will at some point, but we say, hey, our lives don't revolve around you. Rather, our family's life revolves around Jesus. And therefore, we are going to be a family because God has given us to one another, but we are going to be part of the larger family called the church as we follow Jesus together. I think that might be something in that middle space that says, hey, we're going to honor the biological kinship, and we're going to make room for this larger community that God has put us in.
Yeah.
So let's go do it. Let's have some barbecue, baby. Let's have some barbecue.
Get it ready, guys. Barbecue. Let's do it.
Turn it out. Well, awesome, AJ. Thank you so much, man. Always love our conversations. Make sure, everyone, you can find us on the socials and the interwebs. Same Jesus Podcast, Instagram, YouTube. Watch, subscribe, do all the things, share, and join us in our next episode. Until then, you look great, AJ. You look great.
Thanks, Russell. I feel great. Thanks. You are great. We're great.
We'll be praying for your lipids. We'll be praying for your lipids. So
stop talking about my lipids.
You brought it up, man.
Whatever.
Yeah. All right. See you next time.